Hi guys, I'm William. I'm a fifth year BAA student and I'm from Pub. So today what I'm gonna do is walk through an IMC with you and hopefully share some of my tips and tricks that I feel are very helpful um, along the way. So just a few disclaimers before I start sharing because I don't want you guys to start canceling me. So this IMC was the case that my friends and I joined last year for the Toyota Young Marketeers competition. And they gave us 45 minutes to present in the finals. Usually you're given like 10 minutes or 18 minutes at a stretch already. But they gave us 45 minutes. So this IMC is very OA. Like it's very long and very intensive. But what I did was I cut it up. I'm just going to share with you some shareable insights, that I feel are most important and what's sort of enough to be able to get you through. So in case you can't wrap your head fully around it, what I want you to actually focus on is just how we thought about it and how we went about it, not necessarily our output. The second thing that I want to say that's connected to that is I've rephrased some of the output because I'm not sure if I can share it verbatimly. But don't think of it as it's okay to loosely phrase anything. So what I'm showing you is how we think about it, but articulation is very important, right? So some of the things here naman are still verbatim, some aren't. But what's important is you try to iterate again and again what you're thinking of to be able to condensedly communicate to whoever is listening to your IMC, most especially your target market, what you're trying to say. Because they don't have as much time as we do now, right, to think about what we're going to do. They only have one sentence or a few seconds when they see an ad or whatever to understand your message. So when crafting IMCs, try to be deliberate with how you articulate it. And the last thing that I want to say is I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect way or a single sure ball way to get a good IMC. I actually personally believe that what makes a good IMC good is that it works. Because it can be so logical and so cool, pero if it doesn't do its purpose, it doesn't meet its objectives, it basically sucks, right? So what we're gonna try to do lang is to try to maximize our chances to meet our objectives, right? So it may not be perfect, but stick to it, right? Make decisions. Don't fall into that trap that you want to keep making the IMC perfect, because I believe it will never be perfect, right? So just a refresh of the basics. Usually when they ask you to do IMCs, they ask for these three things in a one-pager, or maybe it can be a more than one-pager, but then it's just an expanded version of these three things. The insight, the key message, and big idea, or sometimes just the big idea, and the executions. And those things that I've written at the back, these are frameworks that we tend to use when creating IMCs. When we talk about insights, we usually focus on the truth, motivation, intention of our consumers and our target market. And we try to convey that creatively by using alliterations. Meet alliteration Alex, meet ganyan, right? And then we try to create an objective. Get alliteration Alex to, I don't know, buy more of our products, buy our executions, or something like that. And we have our message to him that our brand is the only brand that can satisfy your deepest needs. Wink, wink. How? Well, we have this very cool and creative big idea that's very cool to watch and make you stop looking at your feed and stop your life. Mga tipong ganun, right? And then we're gonna go with executions, with typical on ground, above the line, digital, below the line, and all these things that we know. And then we usually wrap it up and say, because of our big idea, now alliteration Alex is from point A now to point B. Winner! So it's a very default, diba, basic IMC that you've probably learned as a JMA app, and if you've joined competitions, it's probably what you do. Now, this is important, yes, because this is the basic framework that is expected of an IMC. But I feel like people sometimes forget that frameworks are only tools, right? It's not something that you have to stick to thick and thin, because sometimes it limits what you're able to create. So that's what I'm going to try to do right now. We're going to go through the same basic 3 principles, right? I'm going to walk through an IMC with you, but I'm going to try to show you some potential ideas that you may overlook when you're creating an IMC, just because we're sticking too much on the core ideas of those 3. So we're going to try to focus more on details that are accessory to these 3 big tools that we use when creating IMCs. So basically what I want to show right now when we're trying to use both logic and magic in creating IMC, because right, those are usually the terms they use. It's more of like a surgery, diba? You are given these frameworks, you are given these tools, but at the end of the day, when you open that body up, when you open that campaign up, it's only you who really knows what you have to do, diba? It's not the tools that are gonna dictate. The moment you let the tools dictate, someone's gonna die, right? So you have to take control, right? I think, I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't know, but it sounds like a cool metaphor, so let's go with that. Okay, I'm going to walk through with you today our Toyota IMC competition. And basically, the prompt was a one-liner. Sell the Vios to millennial yuppies. That's all they gave. No specifics, no whatevers. It's just sell the Vios to millennial yuppies. So for me, this is actually an empty canvas because you're allowed to do mostly anything that you would want to think of, because they're not really leaning you towards a certain direction, right? The ball is in your court. This is what our business objective is. Figure it out. So let's go through the 3: insight, key message, big idea, and executions. So usually when we talk about IMCs, what we're trying to do is to use a message that we're going to communicate through several different channels to change the mindset of our target market and our consumer, and hopefully, right, form favorable behavior. And that favorable behavior is most of the time, right, to buy our products. So think of it as if you're trying to manipulate, badly put, how they see you, how you want them to perceive you, and what they want to do with that after. So the insight is a very important foundation of your IMC. And when you think about insights, right, usually they'll show you this picture, an iceberg. When you see a consumer, it's the top of the iceberg. But ang dami niyan sa ilalim. Sobrang daming whys, sobrang daming reasons for the way they act. And they tell you these 3, I feel, common points that can make it difficult for you once you get too focused on them. Number 1, insights are about deeply rooted consumer needs. So focus on your consumer. Just keep asking, why does he do that? Why does he think like that? Ganyan. Next is keep it simple, direct, and immediately understandable. They don't have as much time to digest everything that you thought of, diba? Naging psychiatrist ka, pinag-isipan mo bakit ganun yung decisions nila. You only have 1 sentence to be able to articulate all of that. And if you're not able to condense meaning into it, then you've practically lost everything that you just tried to understand deeper. And the last is that you know that you have a good insight when your consumer says, oo nga, no, to the statement that you just made. Now, all of these are true, diba? I am not going against them. But you have to understand that the insight is the foundation of your logic. And that consumer insight statement is just a product of your logic. It's a product of your latag. Diba? It may not be the end, but it's not the start. It started somewhere else, and then in the middle, you figured out what it is that you're really trying to do, who it is you're really trying to talk to, and that's when you move forward. So what are the repercussions of that? What are the repercussions of that shift from mindset that the insight is not actually the pinakasimula, that the insight is a product of a lot of different thoughts? First, we said insights are about consumer needs. But I think that better insights, that actionable insights consists of the story and the story of your brand and the relationship your brand has built. Diba? Usually when you try to deep dive an insight, you ask why? But sometimes you end up with a problem na you're trying to solve an insight na hindi naman kaya sagutin ng brand mo. Na you're selling cars, but their insight is probably, my father doesn't love me. And then out of nowhere, you're gonna say, here, a Vios, your father's gonna love you. Right? Parang, it doesn't make sense. Right? When you're too focused on consumers, sometimes you're trying to get that consumer insight and just push your brand into it, even though it doesn't make sense. Right? And of course, it's not that start, di ba? Hindi naman ganun kabobo yung mga tao para sabihin, a car will solve your daddy issues. But in simpler forms, sometimes that happens. You're trying to have your brand become Superman and solve every single problem that your consumer has, which shouldn't be the case, right? So to be able to identify a very good actionable insight, it's very important to understand who your brand is, what the situation is, and what your relationship actually is with your consumer, right? So for here, we didn't start with a statement from the consumer. We didn't start on how the consumer lives, right? We started by analyzing, ano ba nangyayari kay Toyota? What is the relationship with millennial consumers? And the first thing that we noticed is a lot of the future purchasers of cars were millennials, but even though Toyota was number one and is number one, a lot of their market share is declining very fast, right? And who's eating it? Accent, Hyundai, and Mitsubishi Mirage, right? And the reason for that is because Hyundai is like in that edge that is super exciting, super damning features, super cool, right? And they're able to communicate that well to the millennials that, hey, I'm cool. And here comes the Mitsubishi Mirage that, hey, I'm fun, but I'm not like super legit fun. I'm chill fun, right? I'm super cheap. I'm functional. I get the job done. I'm just enjoying life, right? And here comes Vios. What's he saying? Taxi po ako. Everything you see, saan ka lumingon, may Vios, right? Of course, that's not what they're saying to everyone, but that's how their lost consumers, right, are understanding, right? So for those who believe in the product, those who love Vios, na millennials, right, they love it for its style, their innovation, their reliability. Dati kasi pangit yung Vios for them, right? But because it became edgier and more sleek, kahit taxi yan, mas cool siya. Cool pa rin siya, di ba? Sleek siya, edgy siya. Right? So, and it's very reliable. Ang daming parts. It's Vios, it's good. So, because we understand the relationship of Toyota and the brand with those target market who purchase and with those target market who do not purchase, right? It makes us be able to identify a more relevant insight. We are able to segment them, diba? As people. Why do they believe in us? Why do they want to purchase versus those who we are yet to convince? Probably with the same message na, hey, they believe us because of this. You should too. Something like that, right? If we're talking about general consumer needs and we're just focusing on the consumer, sometimes you may be able to overlook that. Next day, keep it simple, direct, and immediately understandable. Yes, I believe that condensed insights are the best way to be able to communicate properly and to stem off your different ideas from. But I also believe that condensed insights are only so powerful because of their killer details. When we were starting to understand our consumer, di ba? Hindi lang namin sinabi, how do they act? Ano yung truth nila, motivation? Why? Right? We actually tried to dissect the elements of the truth, the elements of the motivation, the elements of the tension, and not just take the consumer as one big lump. Right? So at the start, we didn't take the consumer as one whole, we tried to segment them. And then now, we're trying to even further break down that singular consumer that we were able to say, okay, that's who we're going to target, right? So our insighting involved three ideas. Who is purchasing and why? The usual insighting that we do. What is their TMT, right? But the second also is, what factors do they consider about the product that they're purchasing? What is important to them? What type of car brands are they looking for? And do we fit that mold? Or in what way can we add value to what they're looking for? And the final question about our insighting is, how do they actually purchase? Maybe, right, the tension is not about our product. Maybe the tension is not about how they perceive us. Maybe we're just not selling to them in the right places. Right? Baka nauunahan lang tayo, na-intercept lang tayo ng ibang car brands when we're actually already top of mind. Right? So, these are the three things, the killer details, that when we were able to break down, right, I believe is what actually won us the competition. Right? Because of these facts that we were able to get, we were able to retrieve and tell the judges, right, and tell everyone listening, these are facts you cannot argue with. And these are facts that only our team was able to answer. That immediately puts you ahead, right? So let's expand on that a little more. For example, usually we talk about data like, yung mga millennials, when they're thinking about buying a car, they want kasi a more well-rounded life. Right? They feel the car is there to make them succeed even more. Right? They want to balance their passions, their social lives, and their work. Right? But data helps. When you have reputable sources that say 87 to 88% of these Filipino millennials actually feel this way, it's hard to argue with you. Right? And then, we look at the factors that they sold. Of course, we were able to identify key factors, but I wanted to highlight this. 43% of millennials, Filipino millennials, see that owning a car as a hassle. For me, these two information show two very different things. They want a car that can do everything, but they're lazy. They don't want to maintain that. They just want to get in. They just want to be like, features, get out, and that's done. They don't know anything about cars, right? They just want the best car for their budget, even though it doesn't totally make sense, because they don't know anything, right? But that's what they want, right? So for me, when you show this, it's actually already leading your latag somewhere, right? Even if I am not able to encapsulate, I'm going to try to encapsulate these two with my consumer insight statement later, right? But if you are able to present this and show this, it's just going to make your consumer insight statement more reinforced, right? They can't argue with that because you've given them numbers and you've shown them the facts. And the last of the three that we've shown kanina is how they purchase, right? And this for me is very important. We've identified that on average, right, it can actually range from 3 to 12 months. That's how bad it is. But on average, a Filipino millennial takes 6 months to purchase. And they do all of this at the same time. But roughly, right, those 6 months, well, actually it's 6 stages, not really months, right? 6 stages in a span of 6 months. They primarily do these 6 things. And what did we identify? We sucked at month 3 and month 5. And what do they have in common? our functional our dealers, our test drives, diba? 82% say that their experience in store is more important. Even if they have very good ads, even if they see that it's going well, like, oh, so cool. When they go in store and they start driving the car, even if they really like everything that they saw digitally, if they didn't like that experience, they won't even consider your car anymore. But 82% ang nagsabi na important yung in-store. 50% of those who go to our store stop buying our car. Why? They stop considering our car, not because our car, but because apparently the sales agents only focus on making sure na makabenta sila. Diba? Ma'am, bilhin nyo na, ganun. And they get so pissed off about that, right? That they don't want to purchase. How did we get this information, you may ask, right? Primary research, we got a bunch of millennial individuals that we knew. And then we sent surveys. We asked them how their experience was. We went to a Toyota store. We asked the salespersons what their experience are. We tried to add 2 and 2 together, how it matched. But also, more importantly, secondary information. Research from credible companies. And we try to align that with what we saw firsthand, right? Because definitely what we see firsthand is very biased. Who are we gonna ask? People in our circles, correct? Hindi naman yung experience ng isang Toyota salesperson pareho sa lahat ng salesperson. But once we see information aligned, both in the secondary and the primary research, then we feel more confident with what we have. And then, lastly, here's that sentence. It's that oo nga no sentence. That's what the ink is. That's what it all boils down to. Well, that's true, right? Our insight is only best encapsulated by a single statement. It's only best encapsulated by that mindset that we now know, but it shouldn't overlook or it shouldn't gloss over all the other key statements, all our other key takeaways. And for me, a very good practice is when you get that one line consumer insight, you try to break it down, probably into 3 key points. From that insight, what are my 3 key main points? What are my 3 main takeaways? Or maybe if it's just one, even better, because that's how focused you are, right? It depends on what you want to do. But also, like what I said kanina, diba? Changing mindsets to create a change in behavior. When we do insighting, what do we usually focus on? Just mindsets, how they think, right? But a very key word there also is change. Do we actually understand the word change? Who are we changing? Yeah, the mindset, we understand. But outside the mindset, who that person is, who that consumer is. What are we changing? What behavior are we exactly changing? Right? Where are we changing it? In the purchasing journey, where should we focus our efforts in to pull them and say, hey, this is the behavior you should do. When should we do it? How should we do it? And that's what I mean. This is our oo nga no sentence. The one at the right, the owning the best packaged car that is easy to own will help me succeed, but I'm scared that I will end up choosing a car that will hold me back instead. Right? But this single statement actually wants to encapsulate our key takeaways from our 3-step insighting kanina. Our first takeaway is when millennial Filipinos buy a car, it's not just a functional decision. It's an emotional decision too. Right? But to expand that, because I didn't include it here, they're very highly functional. Right? If it doesn't meet the functional needs of these Filipino consumers, they won't even consider your car no matter how cool you look. I didn't think of that. Right? Initially, I would think, mga young people gusto nila cool-looking cars kahit not functional. But apparently, that's not what we found out. Right? And the judges actually highlighted that. They didn't know that was the truth. That was the truth as well. Right? So it's an element of our key insight that is not that oo nga no sentence, but it's so pivotal, right, as a detail that reinforces what we're trying to say. And to expound on that, right, it further becomes an emotional decision when they're down to their last two cars. When they're choosing between their 2 to 3 options na lang, 2 options na lang usually, right? The functional aspects of those cars, the functional benefits are usually undifferentiated. The person is just, I get either car, I'll be happy. But the question is, which car will I be happier with? That's the emotional aspect that we're trying to understand. The second is the easiness to own is actually the primary consideration. As we said, they want everything, but they're lazy. And apparently, that laziness is enough to topple over all the other factors that they consider is important in their first car. The last, and I feel is very important as well, is that digital talks to me, but in-store assures me. A lot of the companies will actually initially think, let's go digital. Especially now, everything's online, right? But for us to be able to emphasize that, everyone's gonna go online, yeah, that's okay. But if you're in store, no matter how good your online is, he's not gonna buy. And because of these 3 factors, right, it shows that we know what we're doing. We know what the hell is going on. It's not just si consumer ganito. But we actually understand several facets of the consumer's lives, several facets of his relationship with your product and with the market, right? That makes us able to strategize better on what to do.